Okay guys, so for this video we're going to look at interval and set notations. Just This is a mini lesson just to I have it in here so we know that how we write different things in mathematics, and how, more importantly, how you might see different symbols when you go to take the SOL or the test. We have a few different ways to say the same thing. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is intervals. Okay, intervals are all numbers between two given numbers. Okay, in algebra 2 we're just going to mainly focus on the x-axis. Okay, so if, like, for example, let's say you have a function. I'm just going to draw it here. You have your coordinate plane, something like this. Okay, and I said that we're going to only look at the x-axis. Look at the x-axis here. So, like, for example, you have a graph that looks something like this. Okay, and sometimes in mathematics we don't want to look at the full graph right here. Okay, we want to look at only parts of it. Let's say I want to look at this part right here from here to here. Okay, so I'm just gonna look at this chunk of the graph, this little U shape. In order to do that, I have to use intervals. So and we'll get into more of that just a second. But when we're looking at intervals, we're taking the graph and we're just looking at chunks of it, like this chunk up here. Or maybe I want to look at, this chunk right here, something like this. Okay, or if we want to look at this part right here, I just kind of took the same graph and I sectioned it out. Okay, but in math, if we want to talk about just this blue area over here, we have to use intervals. We have to look at, well, I'm talking about from negative infinity to, I don't know, -6, something like that. Okay, it'll make a little more sense once we get to some examples, but when we're looking at intervals, we're just looking at sections of the x-axis. So, like, let's say from between -2 to 2 or something like that. Alright, in interval notation, we just write the beginning and the ending number of the interval that we're talking about, and we use a square bracket. Square bracket looks like this, kind of like a square bracket, and which we want to include. Okay, if we're talking about it, and if you want to include that value, or if we use a round bracket, kind of like a parentheses, but we call it a round bracket, not a parentheses, if we don't want to include it. Okay, and then in set notation right here, this is the other type of notation that we're going to look at. We just give a little bit more information, such as like what axis we're talking about. We're talking about the x-axis or the y-axis. Okay, or what type of a number we're looking at. Alright, so all I have for you here is a lot of examples and practice, just so we can get used to writing in interval notation or in set notation or set builder notation. These two are the same, and I'll talk about the difference when we get to the examples. Alright, so in interval notation, when we're looking at all real numbers, basically on the x-axis, we're looking at it from all the possible x-axis. So, in the middle we have 0, and then we have 1, we have 2, 3, and then here we have -1, -2, -3. But remember, it goes on. On the right side, it goes off to positive infinity. We have so many more numbers. And on the left side, it goes to negative infinity. Okay? So, in interval notation, remember, we're going to write the first number and then the last number. So since we're looking at all the numbers, the first number technically here is negative infinity, comma, and then the last number, which is positive infinity. By default, you're going to use an open bracket because infinity is not a number. It's just since it doesn't really end at infinity, by default we always use the open bracket. Okay, set builder notation. So here we're looking at the x-axis, right? The x-axis, and then we're going to use this symbol. this is less than, but I read it as x is in between these two numbers. Well, x, all of these x's are between which two numbers? It's between negative infinity and positive infinity. So again, it's the same thing. So I'm going to write negative infinity, and then we're going to write positive infinity. Okay, so here, and again, I did not, I'll talk about where it says equal to, but for now, in set builder notation, we just write x and then negative infinity to positive infinity. Here, set builder, I'll just put all real numbers. Sometimes you'll see this written like this, so you know that we're talking about all from negative infinity to positive infinity. Alright, let's read this description. All real numbers between -2 and 3, including neither -2 nor 3. Neither, so this is kind of written weird, but basically it's telling you that we're looking at numbers from -2, 3, and then I have to decide if I'm going to use an open bracket or a closed bracket. The word neither means it doesn't include it, even though it says the word including, but it says neither, so I have to put open bracket, because it's not including them. So here I write x because I'm talking about the x-axis. I'm going to use less than. This just shows that x is between these two numbers. It's between -2 and 3. Okay, and here honestly this is really not that important, but I want to show it to you. We use this special type of bracket, this little squiggly line, and since we're talking about the x, I'm going to put x such that this little big line, it's not a 1, it just means such that. So we know we're talking about x, and then here is the same thing. X is between -2 and 3. Okay, and then we're gonna do the close this bracket. It's just that in the past I had students really get confused with how a question is presented, because they get confused with all these symbols. So I just wanted to clear it up and show you that we're just talking about the area we're looking at on the graph. Okay, let's look at this. It says all real numbers between -2 and 3, so they have -2 and 3, including -2 but not including 3. Since we are including -2, we're going to put a closed bracket like that. It's already there for you, but I just wanted to highlight it for you right there. Okay, but not including 3, so which means that we do an open bracket. And then when we're looking at set notation, so again x is between -2 and 3, but since it's included, we have to put a less than or equal to. And since 3 is not included, we just put less than. And then when we have set builder notation, so you have bracket x such that x is between -2, including -2, but not including, so I don't put an equal to sign here, 3. Okay. Let's see if there's any other tricky ones. So the main thing here is trying to figure out what type of bracket to use. This is called an open bracket. This is called a closed. Closed means it's included. Open means it's not included. Okay, so I'm going to leave the rest of these for you to practice. Just remember that if anytime you have infinity, you have to use an open bracket. And also, just make sure that the first number is smaller than the second number, okay, because you're always going from smallest to biggest. All right, let me know if you have any questions.